What's up, everybody? Peter X Coffer here, and welcome to another episode of Nothing But the Funk. And today, the episode for today is entitled "Let's Take It to the Stage." And this is it's ironic because you could call this the first diss song, and the latest beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake and J. Cole kind of inspired this. So P-Funk, in the mid '70s, in the Funkadelic brand, not the Parliament brand, but Funkadelic did a song called "Let's Take It to the Stage," and it's the kind you can consider it the first diss song. It was probably maybe later in it may have been later in the '70s. But in this, so George Clinton calls out different acts and said, "Let's take it to the stage." So it is the start of the diss songs that we see in hip hop, but it's different because it's about concerts. It's about who can move the crowd during a live performance. And so it's interesting. Hip hop, there was never the whole dissing, in lyrics and stuff that you have, era and funk that you now have in hip hop. So this kind of, it is the first diss song, but there's a long history of earning respect, and the rivalries were in concerts, not on wax and whatnot. This whole prove yourself on stage is very interesting. It goes back a long time, and covers some of that. But and it's about making your rivals better and making yourself better, and challenging someone else to challenge yourself. That's really what it was all about. A lot of unfortunately, the beefs now is all ego and hip hop, and love my hip hop, but there's things I can do without. So where does and I'll talk about some instances in classic rock too, where the take it to the stage aspect was going on. So this take it to the stage aspect goes all the way back to early jazz. After the shows, they would have the saxophone players would and all the players would, the drummer and the trombone and the piano player, they sit around and then they would battle. And one of the interesting things I read, and I can't remember the name of the book, but it's essentially the history of the guitar. And Charlie Christian, when is the first great guitarist of all time. I mean, the guitar was very new, coming out in the 20s and the 30s, and he didn't live to be very old. He was born in 1916 and passed away in 1942. But he was the first guitarist to make it into the jazz world. He was not. A lot of jazz people were not hearing, weren't down with the guitar, like, oh, that ain't a jazz instrument. And so Charlie Christian, earned the respect of these folks, but, in these hotels or, in the juke joints after the show, battling with folks. And so he really made his mark from 1939 to 1941 when he toured with Benny Goodman. And that really brought the guitar out of the shadows. I mean, the blues guys were playing the guitar, but even country western, they were playing mandolins and banjos. The guitar was not featured at the time, because everybody's like, what is this? I mean, so he really put the guitar on the map, and he really created that electric guitar tone, because he was the first one to really bring the electric guitar into music. And if because, you had to go electric to the stand out in the band. Um, and he really, I mean, he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because he created the first guitar tone. So really, when you listen to Chuck Berry, that guitar tone, he borrowed that from Charlie Christian. Another great jazz guitarist, Les Paul. I mean, he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, probably more for um, his design of Gibson guitars, but he was a good jazz guitarist. He borrowed the tone. Wes Montgomery should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They don't like putting jazz people in there. Widely considered the best jazz guitarist of all time, Indianapolis native. He took Charlie Christian's tone. So I mean, there's no there's no Who, there's no Beatles. I mean, the Beatles used, for their early albums, they used Charlie Christian's tone as well. This same type of competition took was very prominent too with the blues artists. So I mean, you came into town, on the Chitlin circuit, and you watched you played the next night, and you watched who was there, and you wanted to top whoever was there the night before. The other thing where it gets really interesting, I'm, doing research on doo-wop right now for another historical segment for the channel. Doo-wop had this whole battle of the bands concept too. I mean, we'll talk, the importance of doo-wop, is, particularly for pop music, is immense. But, I mean, it was street corner music. It was, 4 to 5 guys or women, singing in harmony. They couldn't afford instruments, so, they got people with, with the right vocal tones, and you got a guy with a deep bass to do the bass and stuff, and they would do mimic strings and guitar licks. It was amazing what they did, but it was very competitive. I mean, in New York City and Philadelphia and these big cities, I mean, you go out and there would be a different um, doo-wop group in each street corner, trying to outdo the other ones and seeing who could get the bigger crowd. So that goes on there, and but the time, the term, the battle of the bands, comes from the historically black colleges, and they've been, they pump up the bands in the halftime shows, and it's very, you know, some would argue that winning, who has the better band sometimes is more important than who wins the game. And so this comes out of black culture. This goes through all these different, and the whole battle of the bands goes, is in the hip hop and in the freestyle, competitions that go on. And, that's where, Eminem kind of made his mark before getting signed. Was he was a great freestyler, and he would just could spit words like nobody else, and that's that really led to him getting signed by Dr. Dre. So one quick classic rock story. So the Monterey Pop Festival, Jimi Hendrix is back in the U.S. He'd gone over to London and just conquered the scene. I mean, Clapton's God was, tagged all over London, as a guitarist, and hey, even Clapton said that Hendrix blew him away. And no disrespect to Clapton. Eric Clapton's a great guitarist. So they come back, and this is the Monterey Pop Festival, and listen to Hendrix's performance. I mean, his Wild Thing is amazing, which he closes with. But this is also the U.S. debut for the Who, and so this is '67, Monterey, California. So, who's going to go first and who's going to go last? And there's a big argument between Pete Townsend and Hendrix about who goes when. And well, it ended up being a coin flip, and the Who lost the coin flip. So, no, the Who won. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm looking at my notes here. Yeah, the Who won. So they won. They went on first and smashed their instruments. I mean, as the Who did that. The start of punk, whatnot. So Hendrix, closes the show with Wild Thing. You gotta listen to it. It's just some amazing playing, and then he has that famous, he burns the guitar, and it's just like this, one of the great shots in rock history of him on his knees, you know, conjuring up the voodoo of his guitar, and then he smashes his guitar. So a little bit in classic rock, but yeah. Wild Thing Monterey Pop Festival. It's on the streaming services. Check it out. So, man, but the battle of the bands in this notion was really, really big. If you go on, even today, and the little funk groups on Facebook, every once in a while, everybody always posts, hey, back in the day, well, when did the opening act, blow away the the headliner? That was the thing. That was the thing. So, Earth, Wind and Fire. I mean, it was one of the big rivalries, friendly rivalry of the '70s. Earth, Wind and Fire versus P-Funk, because they get along. But Earth, Wind and Fire admitted early on they were on a show with P-Funk, and P-Funk blew them away, and like, okay, we need to tighten up our game, and obviously they did. Then the most famous one, and the tour was Build the Battle of the Bands, was Prince and Rick James, and so that would have been Prince with Dirty Mind, and Rick James, I think, would Fire It Up. Was the album that they toured off. They only did about 30 or 40 dates. It was legendary. But Prince was the opening act on that. And Prince and, look, I love them both, but very different. Very different. I mean, Rick was heavily into his drugs, obviously. Rick claimed, never got over it. I saw Rick in couple years before he passed, whether it's 2004, 2005, 2006, something around that time, and then he was still cussing Prince out on stage. But he claimed Prince stole everything from him. Well, and including the idea of Vanity 6, because both of them put out, Rick had the Mary Jane Girls, Prince had Vanity 6. But what Prince did is went out and stole all his cat calls, and did them, and then Rick would come out, and people thought Rick was ripping off Prince, but I mean, but they didn't get along. I mean, Rick was not an easy person to get along, and he pissed Prince off, and Prince is like, you want to be an asshole, I can be an asshole too, and that's, Tina Marie got along with both of them, Tina Marie, Rick James' protege, / lover at times. And, she said, oil and water, they never got along. But that's probably the most famous Battle of the Bands episode in funk history. The second most famous episode of wasn't Build the Battle of the Bands, and again it involves Prince, his 1999 tour and the time. And Prince is a great, live artist, an elite, one of the top five easily. I think he's the best because I mean Michael Jackson was great, but Michael couldn't play instruments like Prince could. He couldn't play the guitar. He couldn't. I mean Prince did that last tour on the piano was amazing, just him and the piano. But Prince's proteges at the time gave Prince everything he could handle. And it probably made, it pushed Prince to be great, even better. But, and I think initially the time was going to go out on the Purple Rain tour. Morris left the band. He left and did his own thing, and that was never going to happen. Prince was not going to go out, with a number one. It kind of fell apart. But I doubt if there was any scenario where Prince would have brought the time out on the road with him for the Purple Rain tour. I mean, that was, he was the biggest act in the world, and the time was, they were that damn good that Prince was not gonna, he went through the fire, that they served, they pushed him to be great, but yeah, he was not gonna, mad respect to the time. Hey, I have a whole Prince sub channel here on my YouTube channel, so I'm a Prince dude, but yeah, that was never gonna happen. So yeah, interesting, trip here, documenting what makes funk so unique and why. And there's been beefs, on the road, and tours with hip hop artists. So there's this aspect is still in hip hop, but the one thing that the funk artists did not do is go after other acts lyrically, or to put it in the term of back in the day, on wax. So, different thing. Hip hop it is what it is, and some of these rivalries are real. Some of them are to sell records. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not gonna jump in and make a determination of what's going on here with Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole and Drake. They've all worked together, and J. Cole just put a diss song out for Kendrick and then announced he's gonna pull it after 2 days. So, which I like. My opinion, those three are, great. Look, I've done Kendrick's album, I've done, Drake and his songwriting, and J. Cole. There's I remember when I was jumping back into music and J. Cole's early stuff and the Weeknd's early stuff reminded me of my early stuff. So, hey, I got mad respect for all three of them, and I'm sure this will pass, and this beef will, be part of the long history of beefs. But yay, it is what it is. So thanks for coming through. I got 5 albums here. They're on the YouTube channel. They're on the streaming services. I got 2 science fiction fantasy novels and a novella on Amazon. So thanks for coming through, and I will see you next episode.